Buying your own home and being able to say you've bought your own home feels like a milestone achievement for so many people. I mean, you've probably been told for years and years and years by your parents, your friends and your colleagues that renting is essentially dead money. But what no one tells you is that buying a flat becomes a money pit that can actually cost you more money, more stress and more worry than renting a flat ever would. And this video is to share a transparent view on the realities of renting versus buying a flat, what the differences are and what you need to be aware of before you commit to the process. Let's get into the video. Now let's kick it off with one thing that both renting a flat and buying a flat both share, and that is a lease agreement. If you rent a flat, you take out a lease agreement with your landlord. It's normally to state things like how much your rent is, what is expected of you in the property, what you can and can't do, and sometimes you might have to get a guarantor to sign your lease agreement, which is basically just proof to the landlord that the payments can be made regardless to whether you can actually afford them or not. When you buy a flat, a lot of people think you buy the flat, you own the flat, and unfortunately this is so far from the truth. A lot of people believe you own the property and just not the land around it, and that's definitely what I thought as well. But until I found out that you actually only own a lease agreement, you don't own a single brick of the property. Now, a lease with a flat when you are going through the buying process is a little bit different. There's lots and lots of stuff that's laid out in this lease. I'm not going to go into too much detail here. I've got lots of other videos that cover this, which I'll link in the comments below, and I do recommend you going to check those out next if you're thinking of buying a flat. But your lease agreement has everything from alterations, service charges, ground rent, how long your lease term is, everything and anything that basically ties you with your lease. Now, the big difference here about a lease agreement for when you buy a flat or take a mortgage out on a flat is that it has a lease term. Now, your lease term can range in years, and the lower the lease, so if your lease drops below 90 years, you need to extend that lease, and it's going to cost you a lot of money. There are some occasions where it might cost people a very little amount of money, but if you are controlled by a big freeholder in the UK, you are probably looking at something that's going to cost you thousands of pounds to extend it. Now, this is what you do not get when you rent a flat, and essentially your lease agreement with your flat when you rent it is for a set period of months or years, and you can walk away from it at the end of that process and you don't have to pay any extra money. But when you have a lease, when you have a mortgage on a flat, it's a whole different ball game, and it could cost you thousands and thousands of pounds that people don't tell you about when you are looking to buy a flat. Now, if you look at that figure over, you know, years and years period, if you have to pay £10,000 for a lease agreement, that could be almost a year's worth of rent. So you're speaking about lease agreements. Now, the next thing is alteration. Now, of course, when you rent a flat or even a house, you can't make any alterations to your property internally, unless you obviously ask your landlord. Now, there are some landlords out there that are very, very grateful to people that want to do internal decoration, they want to add some colour to the space, or they want to just do some, you know, alterations to the kitchen, make it a little bit better. So obviously you can ask your landlord about that, but you really are limited with what you can do with a property, and there comes a feeling that it never really feels like it's your own. Now, when it comes to having a mortgage on a flat or buying a flat, you can do internal decoration. You can paint what you like, you can add loads of prints to the wall. You really are free to do what you like when it comes to internal decoration. However, if you want to make internal alterations, structural changes, perhaps you want to fit a new kitchen, you want to take the carpet up, you want to replace it with wooden floorboards, you have to submit an inquiry to your freeholder to do so. You cannot make alterations of this basis without asking for prior consent, and if you do that without asking prior consent, you are forfeiting your lease essentially, and you could get into a lot of trouble. Now, inquiries often cost money to freeholders, and even if you pay that inquiry, there's no guarantee that you'll actually be able to make that change. There's lots of things that will be contained in your lease that will lay out what you can do. Me, for example, it said that I was not allowed to have wooden flooring in my living room, and that is because it can become a noise hazard to the floor beneath me. And as we're talking about alterations, let's quickly talk about pets. In flats and in houses that you rent, a lot of the times you're not allowed to bring a pet with you. Of course, there's absolute exceptions to this. Lots of people can rent and have pets, so it's just a case of finding someone that's able to take you and your pet. Now, when it comes to owning a flat, again, you have to ask permission if you can have a cat, a dog or another animal in your flat. This just consolidates the fact you do not own your flat when you take a mortgage out on it. You have to ask permission if you want your pet. It costs money to ask this, and again, they can deny it. Now, a big one is internal issues. So I've seen podcasts online and where people have said renting is so much better than buying. If you've got an issue, you literally text your landlord, they show up and they solve the issue. Like, guys, what planet are you living on? Now, I can only speak for landlords that I've dealt with, and I had so many issues with the flat that I was renting. And when I was at uni, there was sewage coming into the property, and there was a rising damp, there was washing machines that didn't work, all those sorts of issues. And a lot of the time, they take ages to come back to you, and normally it takes days for people to come in. It's going to cost the landlord money, and let's just face it, we're just an issue to them. So this is a big problem with renting. If you have an internal issue, you have no control over when it is going to be fixed unless you want to pay for it to be fixed yourself, which of course you shouldn't have to do. However, when it comes your own flat, you have a mortgage out on it, you can look at the positives and the negatives of it. The positive is you have complete control over it. You can ring someone up, you can get them out straight away, but the downside is you've got to pay for that. So again, it's just weighing up the figures that when we look at owning a flat and when we look at renting, when you're renting, you don't have the cost of internal issues that can cost a lot of money to fix. Let's talk about monthly outgoings, okay? So when we think about mortgage repayments, when we buy a flat, you may just be thinking, wow, my mortgage is so much cheaper than if I was renting the same flat. Now, that is probably true because rental payments are often a lot more money than your mortgage payment. But when it comes to owning a flat, you have a lot more figures to add on to that. What you think is just one captive figure. And of course, if you're renting, you've got to add on your council tax and utility bills if it's not included. Now, let's take a look at owning a flat. With owning a flat, you've got your mortgage payment, you've got council tax, you've got utility bills, you've got a ground rent annual charge, which could vary in costs. It could be anything from nothing, a peppercorn ground rent, upwards of £250, upwards to £1,000 if you are living inside London. Now, on top of ground rent, you've got service charge. Service charges are usually worked out on a yearly basis. Some people are able to pay these on a monthly basis. Ours was about £1,500 a year, and we could pay it on a monthly basis. So it was anywhere from around £85 to £100 a month on top of all the other bills that I just mentioned. Now, sometimes there may be things that come up in the flat that you have to contribute to that hasn't been a part of the service charge, and there's no sinking fund to pay for it. Say, for example, a roof suddenly has to be repaired. This cost will be split between every single flat, and this could be, you know, anything up to £1,000 or more per person. Suddenly you've got to find the money to fork out and pay for that. So suddenly it's not just a cheaper mortgage payment for owning a flat. You've suddenly got all these other bills to add on top that you've got no responsibility over when you only rent a flat. I just wanted to briefly touch on uncertainty here. When you rent a flat, there is a layer of uncertainty that will always stay with you. You do go into a contract, so you will know if you've got a 6-month contract that maybe then extends on a rolling basis. It just depends who your landlord is. There's always that thing in the back of your mind that the landlord might one day decide they actually want to sell the property. Loads of landlords are selling up at the moment because of the increase in mortgage repayment. Again, it just reiterates you don't own the property, and you could literally be out on your ear within a month, and through no fault of your own. Now, with owning a flat, you obviously don't have those problems, but there are other worries that come into mind, such as your lease term. If your lease term gets to a certain amount of years, if it dips below 90 years, you're gonna have to extend your lease, and it's gonna cost you thousands and thousands of pounds, which in turn brings its own level of uncertainty to the forefront. And the main reason I'm making this video is today because so many people commented on my video about the pros and cons of buying a flat in England, as to whether they should, you know, keep renting or whether they should buy. Like, you know, what is the best thing to do here? From my personal opinion, having experienced what I have with renting and buying and then selling a flat and all the costs and all the stress that came with that, I personally believe that renting in today's market is a better solution. Now, people commented back and they said, but you don't get any equity when you rent a flat. And that is very true. So I just wanted to touch on equity here. So yes, when you rent your flat, essentially it's dead money. You're paying money out every single month and you're never going to see it again, and it's not a deposit and you've got no equity, you've got no asset as such. However, if we buy a flat, if we have a mortgage on it, essentially with inflation, the cost and the value of that flat should go up in time. So if we do choose to sell it in 5 years, we should get some more equity back on that, and that should make our investment a little bit more worthwhile. However, what people don't look at as a whole is all those other costs which are dead money that we're never ever going to see again, and that is your service charges, that's your ground rent, and that is when anything else goes wrong that your freeholder is asking for more money for. Now, if you look at those figures on a yearly basis, and if it becomes to, you know, extending your lease, suddenly your investment in your flat, you've ended up with no equity left. So if your lease extension cost £15,000, if you then add on all the service charge payments you've had to pay over sort of the last 12-month period, suddenly you've just lost 20 grand out of nowhere. Now that's 20 grand you do not lose if you're renting. You just know where you are with your rental payments each month. And of course, interest rates on mortgages are an all-time high right now, and they may even rise further before the end of the year. So suddenly borrowing a little bit of amount of money suddenly becomes even more money, and I definitely think if you are looking to buy a flat, now is not the right time to do that. With everything else considered, all the costs you're going to incur as a leaseholder, please just wait. You're better off renting until things fall a little. And of course, inflation is at an all-time high right now. Mortgage rates haven't been this high for absolutely years, and it's really caning people, especially landlords and first-time buyers who are looking to get onto the ladder for the first time. And with the rise in interest rates, with all the landlords selling up at the moment, there's so many flats on the market that have just not been shifting for absolutely months, and my best advice is literally would be to wait until those interest rates drop if you are still looking to purchase a flat. Now, I have not mentioned all of the cons that come with having a flat. There's also lots of pros as well, but if you are renting a flat, you probably are already getting a feel for some issues that there might be, especially neighbours, which seems to become one of the biggest problems with being in a flat of any sort. But I want to end this video in saying that buying a flat is sometimes the only solution for many people that are wanting to get onto the first rung of the property ladder. Whilst I had a bad experience with buying and selling a flat, I'm not here to put people off it, but I'm just trying to educate with the risks and what you need to look for if you do want to proceed with purchasing a flat. When you are purchasing a flat, you need to have a really good solicitor who's going to advocate for you and going to raise any issues that there might be with the property. Firstly, you need to find a flat that's got a really long lease, and I'm talking don't touch anything that's less than 120 years. You want something that's going to have good longevity and that you're not going to have to extend for thousands and thousands of pounds in a few years. You need to pay attention to ground rent. Many mortgage lenders are not lending over ground rent of £250 at the moment, and if they are, you have to get a deed of variation or a lease extension that a lot of flat owners don't want to pay for at the moment, so they're then looking to sell those to cash buyers. Look at service charges. How much have service charges increased by over the last few years? How much will they increase by in the next few years? And your lease is your Bible. You need to literally read it with a fine-tooth comb. Don't just necessarily think your solicitor will help you with everything. You do need to thoroughly look through it. These are the terms and conditions you must read before you sign. This is so important. And please find out who the freeholder is as well. Do your diligence before you purchase the property with them, because there will be lots of stories online about some of the major freeholders that you should avoid. And if any of them have Urban Point Limited, please avoid those as well, because they are absolutely terrible. They're money grabbing and they only want money out of leaseholders. And there are so many other things to consider, but those are the most important from a legal aspect to stop yourself getting in from an even worse situation. Buying a flat in England is a minefield, and that is why sometimes I genuinely think that renting is a better option than actually buying a flat. And if I look back in hindsight, I've waited a little bit longer and bought a one-bedroom house or a one-bedroom bungalow just to avoid the leasehold trap. Now, I hope you enjoyed watching today's video. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on the property market. Would you buy a flat again? Are you in the position? If you want any other advice, please do leave me a comment below and I'll come straight back to you. But I hope you enjoyed watching today's video. Please do give it a thumbs up, and I look forward to seeing you on my next video.